What would you do if you were in this situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Which part of this story surprised you the most? Share your reactions in the comments. I love reading what you think. If you could add one twist to this story, what would it be? Let's get creative in the comments. What do you think happens next in the human versus alien saga? Let's discuss your theories below. She emerges from the air, swirling into existence like mist gathering under moonlight. Her eyes glimmer with cosmic colors, her features radiant yet distant. She's the embodiment of ancient beauty and limitless power, but there's a weight in her expression, as if the centuries of granting wishes have become routine. People are always the same, selfish, predictable, grasping for wealth, power, or immortality. She's grown bored of it. They make their wishes, she grants them without a second thought. Another task, another day, another human trying to cheat life. What's the point of any of it? She appears before him with a sly smile, expecting the usual routine to unfold. This one looks ordinary, almost forgettable. His clothes are unremarkable, jeans, an old jacket, worn shoes. His face carries exhaustion, not the kind that comes from a long day but the kind that has settled deep in his bones. Yet there's kindness there, too, in the way his eyes soften at the sight of her. The genie studies him briefly. He doesn't look like a man with lofty ambitions. Not a power-hungry tyrant, or a desperate dreamer hoping to win the lottery of life. Just an ordinary person. She brushes the thought aside. Ordinary men can have the most absurd desires. Her voice flows like silk as she makes her offer. I'll grant you 3 wishes. Anything your heart desires. She waits for the glint in his eyes, the telltale sign of greed she has seen 1,000 times over. But it doesn't come. He doesn't even hesitate. I wish, he begins, and she leans in slightly, waiting. Here it comes, wealth? Eternal youth? The ability to control minds? I wish that the stranger I met yesterday finds peace and happiness. The genie blinks stunned, her smirk faltering. Did she mishear him? No, that was exactly what he said. He's not asking for anything for himself. He's wishing for someone else, a stranger, no less. She tilts her head, trying to process the request. You want me to grant happiness to someone else? She asks, her tone skeptical. The man nods. Yes. There was this person I met. They were having a really hard time. It just seemed like they needed it more than I do. Her surprise deepens, disbelief flickering in her mind. In all her existence, no one has ever wasted a wish on someone they barely knew. Wishes are currency. People hoard them, guard them, and spend them greedily. Yet here he is, throwing his first wish away for a stranger's happiness. Magic ripples outward, subtle but powerful, wrapping around the threads of the world to make his wish reality. Somewhere, the stranger awakens with a lighter heart, burdens dissolving like morning mist. It's done. The genie waits for the rush of satisfaction she always feels after granting a wish. Instead, something strange tugs at her chest. A flicker of admiration, an emotion she doesn't recognize within herself, emerges, uninvited and unwelcome. She narrows her eyes at the man. Why would you do that? He shrugs as if it's the most natural thing in the world. They needed it. That's all. There's no hint of regret or second-guessing in his expression. Just a quiet sincerity that makes her feel off balance. It's unsettling. She's spent millennia watching humans squander every opportunity to do good. Selflessness is not part of their nature, or at least, that's what she thought. For a brief moment, she considers offering to undo the wish. Maybe he'll come to his senses. But she holds back. There's a part of her, small but persistent, that wants to see where this goes. She studies him closely, searching for any sign of regret. But all she sees is a man who seems content, more content, in fact, than many others who wished for riches or immortality. It baffles her. How could he feel this way after giving away something so valuable? As silence stretches between them, the man shifts awkwardly under her gaze. He isn't used to being the center of attention, much less from someone as radiant and ethereal as her. Yet, he doesn't seem intimidated. Just patient, as if he has no expectations of her beyond what she's already done. The genie crosses her arms, her frustration simmering. Why does this bother her? Why does it feel like this man, with his ridiculous kindness, has managed to shake something loose inside her? Humans, she mutters under her breath. Always full of surprises. The stranger opens their eyes, greeted by a morning that feels inexplicably different. For the first time in what seems like forever, their mind isn't clouded with the usual weight. The anxiety that clung to them like a second skin has loosened its grip, and the crushing sense of hopelessness feels distant, like a storm that finally passed. It's subtle, there's no grand revelation, but something has shifted. There's space to breathe. They rise slowly, testing this unfamiliar lightness. Without fully understanding why, they feel an urge to reach out to their brother, someone they hadn't spoken to in years. A rift they thought would last a lifetime now seems small and manageable, like a wound ready to heal. The phone call is awkward, filled with pauses and unfinished sentences, but it ends with plans to meet over coffee. That's more than the stranger thought possible. Later that day, they find themselves standing outside a counseling center they've driven past countless times. The fear that once kept them from going in seems less daunting now, and with a deep breath, they step inside. It's not easy, change never is, but something tells them that this is the first step toward reclaiming a part of themselves they thought was lost. Their dreams, the ones they abandoned long ago, start creeping back into their thoughts. Painting, of all things, a passion they had buried under the weight of survival. They buy a small set of paints that evening, not because they expect anything from it, but because it feels good to hold a brush again. For the first time in years, hope doesn't feel like a cruel joke. The changes ripple outward, reaching the people closest to the stranger. Their brother, who had built walls of his own, begins to soften, reconnecting with old friends. The two of them talk late into the night, untangling years of misunderstandings, and laughter fills the gaps where silence once lived. It's as though the healing between them unlocks something larger, giving them both permission to be better, kinder versions of themselves. Friends take notice, surprised by the transformation. They see the stranger smiling more, talking with purpose, and chasing the things that matter. Conversations shift. People who had grown distant are drawn back into the orbit of this new energy, inspired by the change. Encouraged by the stranger's newfound openness, a coworker seeks therapy for their own struggles. A neighbor, moved by the stranger's story, volunteers at a local shelter for the first time. The effect is quiet but undeniable. Small acts of kindness become contagious, spreading like a gentle wave through the community. People start paying attention to one another in ways they hadn't before. An apology, long overdue, is finally spoken. A teacher offers extra help to a struggling student, who in turn begins mentoring a classmate. These moments, though seemingly insignificant on their own, start forming a delicate web of goodwill that connects everyone. The genie watches from a distance, bewildered by the unexpected chain of events. She's witnessed countless wishes unfold over the centuries, but this is something new. There was no material gain, no grand display of wealth or power. And yet, the simple act of wishing happiness for a stranger has altered lives far beyond what she imagined. The wish wasn't just a moment of kindness, it became a catalyst for something much greater. A question begins to form in her mind, one she's never considered before. Is this what humans mean by happiness? She's granted so many wishes, palaces, fortunes, kingdoms, only to watch people grow emptier with every treasure they acquire. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, she sees joy taking root not in what people receive, but in how they connect. She shifts uncomfortably, realizing for the first time that she's always seen her powers through the lens of transaction. You wish, I grant. A deal, an exchange, nothing more. But now, watching the stranger's life blossom and spread its warmth to others, she wonders if she's been missing the point entirely. Perhaps her power was never about granting desires, but about opening doors, giving people the nudge they need to find happiness within themselves. It's a strange thought, unsettling but not unpleasant. She catches herself smiling, a rare and unfamiliar expression that feels out of place on her face. She wonders if the man who made the wish understands what he's done, how far-reaching his kindness has become. She recalls the look in his eyes when he made that first wish, quiet, unassuming, with no expectation of reward. In all her time among humans, she's never encountered anyone quite like him. And somehow, that thought stays with her, lingering like a melody she can't get out of her head. The genie reappears before the man, her expression a mix of curiosity and frustration. His first wish still lingers in her mind, gnawing at her sense of logic. She can't let it go. No one makes a wish like that without expecting something in return, or so she thought. Why? She asks, voice sharp but not unkind. Why did you use your first wish for someone else? You could have wished for anything, yet you gave it away to a stranger. The man meets her gaze calmly, without a hint of regret. Because they needed it more than I did, he replies simply. I've had enough to get by, but that person, they seemed like they were on the edge. I thought maybe one good thing could change their course. His words land differently than she expected. There's no self-righteousness in his tone, just an earnestness she finds disarming. She isn't sure how to respond. Admiration stirs within her, uncomfortable and strange. It's not something she's felt in a very long time, if ever. Humans were always selfish, predictable. But this one, he's different. He watches her for a moment, sensing her confusion. Not everything has to be about getting something in return, you know, he says softly. Her heart shifts slightly, as though some old, rusted part inside her has begun to turn again. Before she can think it through, the man looks her in the eye and says, I want to use my second wish. She narrows her gaze, bracing for what comes next. Surely, now he'll ask for something for himself. But when the words leave his mouth, they hit her like a bolt of lightning. I wish you could experience joy and freedom, not just servitude. For the first time in her existence, she falters. No one has ever wished for her, the one bound to grant wishes. It leaves her speechless, disoriented. She hesitates, as if granting this wish will unravel some part of her she's kept hidden for centuries. You're serious? She whispers, the disbelief evident in her voice. The man nods, his gaze steady. You deserve it too. Reluctantly, almost cautiously, she allows the magic to flow through her once more. It's not like before, this magic feels softer, lighter. The shackles of ancient obligation loosen, though not entirely gone. A strange sensation spreads through her, a warmth that's unfamiliar and yet comforting. She feels lighter, more human, as if her essence has shifted from something bound to something free. She lets out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, blinking in astonishment. What did you do to me? She murmurs, almost in awe. You're free to feel, the man says, smiling gently. That's all I wanted for you. The genie, for the first time, feels the absence of weight, not just physically, but emotionally. The endless task of granting wishes, the monotony of it all, feels distant. In its place, there's a flicker of something she can't quite name yet. Is this what joy feels like? They begin spending time together, not as genie and master, but as two beings curious about life and each other. The man takes her to places she's never noticed in all her years on Earth. They watch sunsets in silence, sitting side by side, the sky painted with hues she now sees not just with her eyes but with her heart. She laughs, really laughs, for the first time in centuries, at the silliest things, a dog chasing its own tail, children playing without a care in the world. The sound feels strange to her, but she finds that she likes it. It's infectious, too, drawing a laugh from the man. See? He says with a grin. Told you it's not so bad. She's beginning to understand what he meant by freedom. It's not just the absence of chains but the presence of choice, of finding joy in the little moments that life offers. Over time, their conversations grow deeper. They talk about happiness, meaning, and what it means to be fulfilled. She confesses, somewhat hesitantly, that she's never really understood humans until now. I thought granting wishes would make people happy, she admits. But it never seemed to work that way. The man listens patiently, his expression thoughtful. Maybe happiness isn't something you can just give. Maybe it's something people have to find for themselves. His words stay with her long after he speaks them, lingering in her thoughts like a song she can't forget. She begins to wonder if her powers, which she once thought of as a gift, were more of a curse. Had she spent all these years granting empty wishes, only to miss the point of life herself? There's a subtle shift in her as she contemplates this. The idea that life's meaning lies not in what one can get but in what one can give becomes clearer with every passing day. The genie appears once again, this time with a look of expectation, though softer than before. You have one wish left, she reminds him, her voice carrying an unspoken assumption. This is the moment. This is when he finally uses it for himself, as everyone always does in the end. No one can resist. Everyone takes what they can when it's offered freely. The man doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he looks at her, really looks at her, and something tightens in his chest. He didn't expect this connection, this bond that had formed between them. He'd grown used to having her around, her presence filling spaces he didn't even realize were empty. The thought of using the final wish feels heavier now. Whatever choice he makes, it will change everything. The possibility of wishing for her freedom creeps into his mind, but with it comes the realization, if she's free, she will leave. He knows that. How could she not? She's spent centuries bound to others, carrying out commands. Freedom would mean stepping into a life of her own, a life that may not include him. He hesitates, torn between what's right and what his heart wants. Holding on to her isn't fair, but letting her go feels unbearable. Still, he knows the answer, even if it hurts. Some things are too important to keep to yourself, no matter how much you wish you could. After a long pause, he meets her gaze with quiet resolve. I've decided. Her eyes narrow slightly, watching him, waiting for the inevitable selfish request. She's ready to hear it. What she isn't ready for is the words that follow. I wish that you, and anyone else who grants wishes, can choose their own destiny. The air shifts thick with magic. For the first time in her existence, the shackles of her servitude dissolve. It's not just freedom from him, it's freedom from the ancient rules that bound her to grant wishes for others. She can live now, really live, however she chooses. Tears form in her eyes before she even realizes it, and without thinking, she steps forward and wraps him in a tight embrace. The gratitude she feels is overwhelming, beyond anything she has words for. No one has ever given her a gift like this, something so simple yet profound. He's not just freeing her, he's given her a future. Thank you, she whispers against his shoulder, voice thick with emotion. He smiles, though the corners of his mouth waver. It was the right thing to do. She pulls back slightly, still holding on to him, as if reluctant to let go. But she knows she has to. This is what freedom means: choices, opportunities, and the courage to walk forward, even when it's bittersweet. The man watches her as she prepares to leave. There's no sadness in her movement, only a quiet determination. She's stepping into a world that's finally hers to explore. And despite the ache in his chest, he feels a deep sense of peace. He's done what needed to be done, even if it means letting go. I'll miss you, he admits, his voice soft but sincere. She gives him a warm smile, one that seems brighter than any she's worn before. I'll miss you too. But I'll carry this with me. She places a hand over her heart, as if marking the moment within herself. As she turns to leave, she glances back one last time, her expression a mixture of fondness and admiration. I never knew humans could be so extraordinary. And with that, she walks away, each step lighter than the last. She doesn't look back again, but she doesn't need to. The man stands where she left him, content in the knowledge that he did the right thing, even though it cost him something precious. For the first time in his life, he understands what real happiness feels like, not in holding on, but in letting go.